Thank you for joining us. I'm Jared Kelly, here with 12-term Congressman, 3-time presidential candidate Ron Paul, with an urgent warning he's sharing exclusively right here for all Americans who are watching this, regardless of political party. Dr. Paul, it's an honor to have you with us, sir.
It's my pleasure, Jared.
Well, let's get right to it. You believe our country is on the cusp of a massive financial crisis. Just how bad are you predicting the crisis will be?
I think it's going to be very bad. I think it'll probably be worse than our Great Depression. I think it's going to be worse than the crisis that we had in 2008 and 2009. And I'm going to talk very specifically about the steps you should take to protect yourself. In short, I believe we as a nation are on the brink of a massive financial crisis, infinitely worse than the crisis of 2008. And that's because it won't be a banking and mortgage problem, but a full-blown currency crisis, the likes of which we've never experienced in this country. The savings of millions of people could be wiped out overnight. The stock market could crash by 50% or more. The way of life we've enjoyed as Americans for 50 years could come to an end. It's not a question of if this will happen, but when.
So why now? Why are you speaking out about this prediction today?
I'll tell you why, because most Americans don't have a clue about what's going on. Most people have no idea that in the past 6 years, we've created $4 trillion of new money out of thin air. At the same time, since 2006, we've doubled our national debt. I've said hundreds of times throughout my career in the House, prosperity cannot be created out of thin air by a central bank. The people running our country today are living in a fantasy world. And if you're not careful, you and millions of other everyday Americans will pay the price.
So, Dr. Paul, what do you think will be the biggest impact of this crisis?
Well, sooner than most people think, I predict we'll see people losing confidence in the U.S. dollar as a simple result of investors around the world realizing our currency is no longer the safe haven it once was. And you cannot restore confidence with more paper money. And when the currency collapses, nearly everything else goes with it. Stocks, bonds, commodities, you name it. When you destroy a currency, you can destroy the entire economy. You can destroy the whole nation. The middle class gets wiped out. The way you live, work, travel, and retire and invest in America, everything is going to change. Some of it in ways most people can't even imagine.
So, essentially, you're predicting the entire U.S. financial system will collapse. As someone who's spent 22 years in Congress, what do you think will be the immediate impact on the federal government?
Well, I'm fearful of a collapse, Jared. For one thing, it makes it a lot harder for our government to borrow money and pay interest on all the debt we've racked up, or to expand the welfare state, or to station the U.S. military in 140 countries. But forget the government. The real concern is what happens to everyday Americans, especially the middle class.
How so?
Well, for the everyday American, if the government's broke, all your wealth, all your savings will be put in jeopardy. We'll see massive changes in our retirement system and Social Security. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the government take over people's 401ks and IRAs.
Why is that?
Because doing that would essentially force people to buy worthless government bonds, whereas investors in the free market wouldn't touch them. In fact, I think we're likely to see huge tax increases and even a wealth tax, a fee on all your savings and valuable assets.
Can you explain further about what you mean by a wealth tax?
Absolutely. Anything is possible. It's only going to get worse. When this currency crisis hits, the government's #1 priority will be to control the existing supply of capital. We'll see all kinds of new laws and rules about what you can do with your money, where you can put it, where you can move it. And of course, we'll see a massive inflation when all those trillions and trillions of newly printed dollars make their way into the economy. Because we can barely finance our debt right now, so you can imagine what it's going to be like when interest rates go up 0.5% or 1% or 2%, the ball game's over. It's going to be especially rough on seniors or anyone who relies on the government for income.
But isn't inflation, is that really the main worry? I mean, we've had inflation before, back in the 70s.
Well, for starters, it'll lead to a total breakdown of the stock market. Imagine 2008, Black Monday, and even the crash of '29, all happening in a single day. The middle class will be wiped out. But you're right, in a certain sense, what really worries me isn't necessarily a stock market crash. The real killer will be the effect of all this on our society and our liberties. But we have to have an understanding about how important personal liberty is because it is connected to our prosperity. We were the most prosperous country in the world, mainly because we had the most liberty. But now we've lost our liberty, and guess what? Our prosperity is being threatened.
You mean unemployment?
No, it goes deeper than that. When you destroy a nation's currency, you destroy businesses, you destroy friendships and families. Faith in money is critical to a free society. Without it, you can forget about businesses and commerce, and you can forget about any sense of normalcy. People won't have any clue what to do when there's a line around the block just to access the ATM, or when the banks start shutting down. They won't have any idea what to do when stores stop accepting dollars as payment, or when no one's willing to make a loan anymore.
So you're predicting social unrest?
Definitely. I think we'll see problems in the big cities especially. In fact, we're already seeing the beginnings of that. Ferguson, the riots in New York and Detroit. What it comes down to is that people are going to be very, very unhappy when they turn on the TV one morning and hear that their life savings is suddenly worth a fraction of its former value. If investors around the world lose confidence in the U.S. dollar, the prosperity we've enjoyed since World War II will essentially cease to exist. Our governments on both the federal and state level could temporarily shut down. Businesses will close their doors. The price of things like milk and bread could skyrocket. Government created this. How can you depend on the Federal Reserve to solve this problem when they are the culprit who brought about the bubble and brought about the crash? The U.S. dollar is built entirely on confidence. If that confidence dissolves, so does everything else.
And that's the weakness of paper money.
Right. You see, governments have the power to declare paper to be legal tender, but they do not have power to give that money value. And this is something the politicians won't tell you. They've all been taught bad economic policy. I don't think they're bad people. I think, another term that is not as generous, but they're just ignorant of good, sound economic policy. I know because I spent 12 terms in Congress fighting the people who control our monetary system.
In fact, the threat of a currency crisis is what first drew you back into politics back in the 70s. When President Nixon took the U.S. dollar off the gold standard in 1971, you became a Republican candidate for Congress. You served on the House Banking Committee, where you blamed the Federal Reserve for inflation and railed against banking mismanagement as the cause of the savings and loan crisis.
That's correct. The Federal Reserve should be abolished. The average American doesn't have a clue just how dangerous and corrupt the Federal Reserve System really is. Today, we've essentially embarked on an out-of-control experiment with our currency, printing absurd amounts of money out of thin air and borrowing so much that we can never, ever hope to pay back our creditors. You realize it took our nation 216 years to rack up $8.5 trillion in debt, and then just 8 more years to double that amount.
Well, let me ask you this. You served on the House Banking Committee, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and you sponsored over 600 legislative bills. Why aren't you back on Capitol Hill trying to spread your message from a congressional office?
Because I'm finished with Congress. For me, this has nothing to do with politics or fundraising. It's the biggest financial story of my life, which I've been tracking my entire career. And now that it's finally here on our doorstep, I just want to warn as many people as possible. The simple fact is, the more people who prepare themselves, the better off we're all going to be. The fewer people relying on the government to fix this problem, the stronger our country will turn out in the long run. Because believe me, the government won't be able to do a single thing about this crisis. Remember, they're the ones who caused it. And remember this too, by the time we see a full-blown currency crisis, it'll be too late for you to protect yourself. The government won't warn you or save you. And I say that as someone who's met with every U.S. president for the past 40 years and every Fed chairman. I remember I once rode alongside President Reagan on his helicopter Marine One. And the subject of what's happening to our money came up. And he told me, he said, "Ron, no great nation that abandoned the gold standard has ever remained a great nation." I also confronted Alan Greenspan about this, and he told me he still stands by his original thesis, which was published decades ago. He wrote, "In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value."
But you're through with Washington now.
Yes, my years of fighting in Washington are over. I don't work in Congress anymore, and I'm not making any more runs for the presidency. And that's why today, all I can do is spread this public message right here, right now, for anyone who's watching, and explain exactly how I believe you should protect yourself and get prepared.
In fact, you're recommending an entire blueprint of steps to get ready, correct?
That's right. I think it's remarkably simple for most everyday Americans to prepare. Now, keep in mind, I don't think you need to open foreign bank accounts, and I don't think you need to flee the country. The fact is, there's still nowhere else on earth I'd rather live than right here. But the important thing to realize is that you have to take action now. You have to realize that your financial safety is in your own hands. You can't wait for Washington to fix these problems. Real monetary reform will only come after a major currency crisis hits. And for most Americans, that will be much, much too late. That'll be only after a catastrophic stock market crash, after the bankruptcy of dozens of financial institutions, and after many people's savings are completely wiped out.
And you're convinced these problems can't be fixed by elected officials inside our government, right?
I tried to change the policy myself from the inside for 22 years. Believe me, I tried. And my conclusion is that there's absolutely no hope for the Fed or the government to conduct responsible monetary policy. I've spent decades grappling with Fed officials in committee meetings and at luncheons and private discussions with Fed chairmen. The problem is that our government cares very little about the basic laws of economics. They have very little understanding about how a free market actually works.
What do you mean by the basic laws of economics?
I'm talking about the consequence of printing paper money with no regard whatsoever for the value of that money. You see, governments can fool people for a while by printing paper money, but in the end, it's inevitable that trust in the money will be lost. Without trust, paper money is nothing. Trust in the dollar is absolutely required for it to keep its status as a vehicle of economic exchange. And we're already starting to see that trust fall apart in billions of dollars worth of transactions with more than 10 countries around the world. For example, China is also beginning to trade directly with Germany, Brazil, Russia, Australia, Chile, India, and South Korea, all outside the U.S. dollar.
Some politicians might say, what about all the positive changes and steps we've seen in the economy in recent years? I mean, the market's up 200% since 2009. Real estate prices have rebounded. At a glance, many people believe that America's back to normal.
Don't believe it. The problem is, these politicians typically look in the wrong places for evidence. The Consumer Price Index, for example. You can't rely on a report like that because the numbers simply aren't believable. Whatever you might think about the market and economy, whatever political party you affiliate with, you can't afford to ignore the possibility that things are not back to normal in America right now. But now what's going on in the world is the West is selling gold. The gold is leaving the United States and other places in Europe and going east. After all, can things really be normal when roughly 75% of Americans have been living paycheck to paycheck? Can things really be back to normal in America when the number of people on food stamps has doubled since 2008 and when half of all children born today will be on food stamps at some point in their life? Or when the too big to fail banks that got bailed out in 2008 are now 37% larger than they were back then? Can things really be normal when our country's money supply has increased by 400% since 2006, all just printed out of thin air? It's like something out of Weimar Germany or the last 20 years in Zimbabwe.
Do you have an exact date when you believe this crisis is going to hit?
No one can tell you exactly when this new crisis is coming. Not me, not anyone else. The point is simply that what's going on today certainly isn't normal, and it's guaranteed to end in disaster. People are going to lose a lot of money. They aren't going to understand exactly how it happened, but they're going to be angry, and they'll act on that anger in very predictable ways.
So you believe the bull market that we've experienced in recent years is all just smoke and mirrors by the Fed? And most of the government reports that we listen to are misleading?
Yes. What's inflating the world's equity markets today is the intentional and foolish behavior of our political leaders and central bankers. And when these people make mistakes, they're big mistakes. They're not the little mistakes civil society and private markets can fix. Like I said, America is not immune to the laws of basic economics, and we're not the first country who's tried printing massive amounts of money as a way of cleaning up a financial mess. It never works. Over the past 100 years, the type of debt crisis we're facing here in America has appeared in Germany and Russia, Austria, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Poland, Japan, China, Greece, Ukraine, Italy, Ireland, Portugal, and Spain. And in every single case throughout human history, printing more money has never solved the problem, ever, and has always led to severe consequences for ordinary citizens who found themselves unprepared.
But what about all the positive steps we've seen in the economy in recent years? I mean, isn't there a chance that a lot of these concerns just may not surface at all?
I don't think it's a positive step when 52% of all American workers make less than $30,000 a year by one recent measure. Do you? And I definitely don't think it's a positive step when every single hour of every day the U.S. government spends about $200 million it doesn't have. It's precisely that sort of fiscal mismanagement that caused me to sever all ties with the Republican Party in 1987 and run for president the following year.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. What'll set this whole thing off? I mean, where's the tipping point?
The tipping point happens when people lose confidence in the U.S. dollar, and when that happens, interest rates will rise dramatically. And I believe it's going to happen sooner than most people think. Think about this. Every 2 months, the U.S. government borrows more money than the combined annual profits of the 100 biggest publicly traded companies in America. Does that sound sustainable to you?
No, but at this point, it's completely normal for America, right? I mean, the world already knows we have this huge debt, so how is that new?
America can't be a debtor forever. It can't be normal that we owe more government debt than any country in the history of the world. It can't be normal that we have more debt than every country in the European Union combined. Granted, we've been hearing about this stuff for years, but what's new about all this is that the costs of maintaining all that debt are about to skyrocket. Again, you can't put off paying your debts forever. It always catches up to you. It's not a question of if, but when.
Yeah, but if paying...
Wait a minute, hold on. Think of it like this. The Fed has manipulated interest rates 10 times since August 2007, from around 5% to between 0 and 0.25, okay? How can a rate of near 0% last forever? It can't. So ask yourself, what happens if the average real interest rate goes up? I'm not talking about skyrocketing rates of 10% or so, which aren't hard to imagine, but I'm talking about if rates just go up to normal. What if the rate ends up being just 4% annually? How does the government pay off all our debt? Do you realize that even if we paid it off over 30 years, a 4% would end up spending $58 trillion just to simply repay what we owe right now? If the rate ends up at 6%, we'd spend $102 trillion. How do we pull that off?
Well, a lot of this stuff is just mismanagement by politicians, right? Isn't there a chance the rest of the world might, I don't know, cut Americans some slack and wait around for policy change?
No, that's not how international credit works. 10 different countries have already signed deals to begin phasing out the U.S. dollar as the basis of trade. And you definitely can't wait for politicians to solve the problem. Our net public debt has more than doubled since 2006. This is years and years in the making. The politicians can't solve this problem. There's no chance they'll work this out. It's too late. As far as the world cutting America slack, you have to remember that the entire concept of money is based upon soundness, the promise of value. That's what money is all about. You've heard the expression, good faith.
Sure.
If we don't make a good faith attempt to pay back our debt, nobody will loan us any more money. And printing even more money makes the problem worse. And that's because the entire idea of honest money developed naturally to replace bartering so that farmers didn't have to walk around with a bag of potatoes anytime they wanted to buy something, right? Paper money is a promise that something of value is tied to it, like gold. We left the gold standard decades ago, so the U.S. dollar is only as good as the faith people have in it.
And that confidence is already starting to crumble.
Exactly. And when money can't be trusted, the price signals in the market all around the world can't be relied on anymore, which makes it harder and harder for people to exchange labor and capital internationally. The entire system breaks down as a result of the inevitable mistakes people make investing and saving their money. The scary thing is that many people in America, including many politicians in Washington, don't understand this because the U.S. dollar has dominated the financial world for more than 50 years.
Okay, so to summarize, you believe all the trillions of dollars of new money being printed by the government will cause a massive devaluation of the dollar on a scale that we've never seen before. People could lose a bulk of their savings in a matter of hours, and most people will be completely surprised.
For some people, the only warning you're going to get is me sitting here right now and talking to you. You won't hear about this on the news until it's already happened. And the government won't say a word. It would cause a panic. And yes, the crisis could arrive literally overnight, as it did in Great Britain in the 1970s. We're already seeing the warning signs. The Fed itself has announced that since 2003, the exchange value of the U.S. dollar has plummeted by as much as 20%. The IMF has proposed an entirely new world reserve currency system. Even Warren Buffett, a man who built his fortune on the strength of America, has moved something like 70% of his remaining government fixed income investments into foreign currencies.
Now, Dr. Paul, you have a unique record in Congress. You never voted for more debt. You tried to audit and even abolish the Federal Reserve, and you refused to vote for anything that didn't strictly adhere to the Constitution. Isn't there anything that monetary experts or fiscally minded politicians can do to stop this crisis from happening and prevent this tragedy before it's too late?
Theoretically, maybe, but they won't do it for political reasons. No way. The actions of the Fed and the last two White House administrations have gone beyond anything I could have ever imagined or fought in Congress. It's too late. I fear there could be civil unrest, massive unemployment, a huge drop in stock prices, great destruction of wealth, the erosion of personal liberties, vicious capital controls, the suppression of privacy, authoritarian clampdowns, bank and brokerage closings on a massive scale, and ultimately a major crisis as the U.S. dollar is rejected for almost any non-paper alternative. And believe me, I'm not trying to scare you. At this point in my life, all I want is for Americans to wake up, pay attention, and realize the logical conclusion of what our government is doing today. The only question is, will you take the steps necessary to get ready? I sure hope so. One thing you can definitely do is protect your wealth.
And what steps are you recommending personally? You're presenting a step-by-step blueprint for everyday Americans to prepare, correct?
Yes, but the blueprint isn't something I created myself. I've studied economics for more than 50 years, and I've done well in my lifetime owning hard assets like gold and silver and real estate. But I'm not an investment expert, so I've been looking around for someone I could feel comfortable recommending, and I found just that person.
Porter Stansberry.
Right. Porter Stansberry is one of the few people in America who's been as outspoken as me in recent years, explaining how our government is creating a currency crisis of epic proportions. In fact, he spent millions of dollars warning anyone who would listen to him. And what I like in particular about Porter is that he explains not only what's going to happen, but just as important, what you can do about it. It's not all doom and gloom. If you know what to do, there's a chance to profit in what could turn out to be the biggest redistribution of wealth in American history.
Many people believe that Porter Stansberry's blueprint is one of the most enlightening documents available to ordinary Americans who are worried about a currency crisis. It's called America 2020, the Survival Blueprint, and it contains over 250 pages of detailed instructions on what he's personally doing to prepare and protect his finances from a coming currency collapse. Dr. Paul, he's mailed out tens of thousands of copies to retirees all across the country.
I think it's a fantastic document for one main reason. It allows you to get the facts for yourself, learn about what's happening, and get the steps necessary to protect yourself and your family. Because the fact is, the crisis looks inevitable, and the important thing is that now is the best time to get ready, while the means of saving yourself are still cheap, easy, and legal.
And it was these ideas that actually led you to discover Porter's investment research firm, Stansberry Research. Is that right?
Correct. They're one of the leading financial research firms in the country with more than 350,000 subscribers in over 120 countries around the globe. And they're not affiliated with any political party. Like me, they're not afraid to speak their mind and ruffle feathers, but they speak the truth.
And when it comes to recommending the best ways of preparing for and potentially profiting from the coming crisis, you believe that Porter Stansberry's book, the America 2020 Survival Blueprint, is the best place to turn right now?
I do. Porter and his firm believe, as I do, in free markets and personal responsibility, and they're just as upset as I am about what's happening to this great country. But more importantly, I can tell you from firsthand experience that these folks do great work. They're smart, they're thorough.
Dr. Paul, I'm sure you could have received a lot of money if you went to work with Wall Street banks or brokerages. Why not try to prevent this crisis by maybe working alongside one of the big players in New York?
No, I'm not interested in working on or with Wall Street. Those guys want more handouts and special favors than welfare recipients. And frankly, bankers are just as helpless as anyone else to stop the government from printing money. In fact, one thing I like about Stansberry Research is that they don't work anywhere near or with Wall Street. They're based in Baltimore, and they're the exact antithesis of Wall Street bankers and D.C. lobbyists. More importantly, by remaining outside the financial system, Porter Stansberry and his team avoid all the typical conflicts of interest and petty politics that plague Wall Street firms.
Conflicts of interest on Wall Street are exactly what led to the 2008 financial crisis to begin with, right?
Exactly, but the folks at Stansberry Research aren't directly involved in the financial system at all. They simply produce great financial research. The facts on what's happening, what to do. That's it. And for me and the folks I care about, that's all I'm interested in a way of sharing exactly what's going on and what you could and should do to prepare.
Porter Stansberry's new book, America 2020, The Survival Blueprint, has drawn attention not just from you, Dr. Paul, but also from investors across America who tell us it's a must-read. Joe R. says, "I love the book. It is so clear and concise. I have studied a bit about the smartest ways to survive what is coming, but this put all the best ideas together in one place." And David N. says, "This book might go a long way to help others survive the difficult times that lie before us. It is the best summary in regard to what inevitably must occur that I have seen."
I completely agree. I think every American retiree should own a copy of the Survival Blueprint.
And Carol R. writes, "This is a story that all Americans should know about. Unfortunately, when I try to explain it to my friends, they don't believe me. Most people simply want to bury their heads in the sand and pretend that nothing is happening."
Right. The sad reality is that a lot of Americans feel that way and will be completely blindsided by this crisis. And that's why I strongly believe Porter's book is a great resource, not only for understanding what really is happening in America right now, but to learn the steps to protect yourself.
It must be frustrating to know that after 22 years in Congress, you weren't able to stop a crisis like this from developing.
How could I? When I left the House in 1984 to return to my medical practice, I wrote a farewell address that responded to this exact problem. In the address I wrote, "Special interests have replaced the concern that the founders had for general welfare. It's difficult for one who loves true liberty and utterly detests the power of the state to come to Washington for a period of time and not leave a true cynic." I said that back in 1984, and nothing has changed since then, Jared. The best thing I can do now is spread the message through education. That's why I'm speaking directly to any American who will listen. Because no matter what the U.S. Constitution says, it's Washington who controls our monetary system, and they've put us on a direct collision course for financial disaster.
Dr. Paul, have you seen anyone else offer a way to prepare, a way for ordinary Americans to protect themselves?
To my mind, the absolute best step you can take is to get a copy of Porter Stansberry's new book. I agreed to consult with Stansberry and do this interview because I believe in their work. The America 2020 Survival Blueprint is what I'd recommend to my own family.
By the way, I should mention, this book is not available anywhere else.
Well, Dr. Paul, sir, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us today. Any final words?
Yes. I'd like to urge everyone who's watching this to please do not ignore what's happening in America right now. Trouble is coming, and I strongly recommend that you, your family, and anyone you care about get fully prepared for the difficult and dangerous days ahead of us. Don't wait until it's too late, please.
Thank you. And as part of this first ever exclusive interview with Congressman Ron Paul, Stansberry Research is offering to make a copy of America 2020, The Survival Blueprint, available to you right now in the next few minutes. For details, keep watching, and thank you for joining us.
Today, you can get a limited edition copy of Porter Stansberry's new book. It's called America 2020, The Survival Blueprint. This 300-page blueprint details the exact steps you must take to prepare for America's looming currency crisis. This is a handbook, a blueprint, and an owner's manual for how to protect yourself and your family over the next 5 years. Many are referring to it as the most valuable book in America. Dr. Ron Paul likes this new book so much he wrote the foreword and said, "This book is a must-read. I don't know of anyone who has spent as much time and money as Porter Stansberry figuring out how to protect yourself and prosper in the years to come." One thing you need to keep in mind is the next big crisis in America is not going to be a banking crisis like we had in 2008. It's going to be a currency crisis that's much bigger, and government bailouts aren't going to do a thing to help. That's why in this blueprint, you'll learn the 4 most important steps you must take. Step number 1, get some of your money beyond the reach of the U.S. government. Most Americans don't know that there are 3 legal assets that you never, ever have to report to the U.S. government. Yes, you still have to pay taxes if you earn income on these assets or sell for a profit, but you legally do not have to tell the government or anyone else in the world that you own them. The benefit of this should be obvious. Nothing is more dangerous than a broke, desperate, and well-armed government. The less the government knows about where you have your money, the better. They will simply have a very hard time taking what they don't know you have. Every American needs to get some money beyond the government's reach. Porter Stansberry and many of his colleagues have used this strategy to put millions of dollars beyond the reach of the U.S. government. We recommend you do the same. Remember, it's 100% legal. The details on this strategy start on page 43 of the Survival Blueprint. Step 2, own the most lucrative assets in a time of crisis. There's no telling exactly how bad things are going to get as this crisis unfolds in America. There could be riots, protests, mobs, bank runs, even massive arrests for extended periods of time. Yes, you want to own hard assets, such as gold and silver, and more on that in a moment. But we have found through exhaustive studies that there's something even better than precious metals to own during a crisis. In short, there is one asset that you can own, now widely available in America, which should help protect you and your family from this chaos and could also make you a small fortune in the years to come. In fact, an index tracking this asset has absolutely crushed the stock market. Since 1992, it's returned well over 1,100% gains. Best of all, it provided these gains with almost no volatility. Just take a look at this chart. See how the black line goes straight up without any hiccups? Multi-millionaire investor Barton Biggs, who did an exhaustive research on which type of assets survive a crisis, said this particular asset has historically protected both your wealth and your life. During World War II, for example, when millions of families lost their entire life savings through inflation or government seizure, this was the one asset that enabled some families to survive and to protect, preserve, and grow their money. That's why it's an asset so many of the richest people in America have historically owned or are buying. I'm talking about the Walton family of Walmart fame, Bill Gates, Ted Turner, the Hilton family, Charles Schwab, Microsoft billionaire Paul Allen, the Hunt family of Texas oil fame, the Hearst family, the Ford family, and more. As multimillionaire Doug Casey says, it's the one thing you should own in the years to come. All the details on how to acquire the most valuable asset in a time of crisis start on page 97 of the Survival Blueprint. You'll also learn about a one-of-a-kind silver investment that could conservatively pay you 1,000% in the years to come. What we're talking about here is a unique type of silver investment most people don't know about, which could eventually be the most profitable investment in America when the next crisis hits. This silver investment is truly one of a kind. There's nothing else like it in the world as far as we know. The details on this investment start on page 53. And that brings me to step number 3. Get out of dangerous assets and into those that will protect you. The one thing you must understand is that a currency crisis, like the one we're about to have in America, will cause a huge redistribution of wealth. In fact, it's already started. And you must have a clear understanding of which assets to own in the coming years and which to avoid. That's why in this Survival Blueprint, you'll learn how to get real hold-in-your-hand silver for less than $3. This is the absolute best way to buy silver in the world. And it's important to remember, silver is the ultimate currency in a real financial crisis, probably even better than gold. One multimillionaire investor says silver will ultimately reach more than $150. That's well over 700% higher than today's price. the world's 3 safest currencies. You can buy them right here in America without ever leaving home and without ever opening an offshore account or anything like that. 2 of the most dangerous investments for the next 5 years. Almost every American has one or both of these, but probably doesn't realize the danger. The secret paper currency used by the world's wealthiest people. This has nothing to do with the US dollar, the euro, the Swiss franc, or any other paper currency you've heard of before. It also has nothing to do with gold, silver, or any precious metals. But these certificates are among the most lucrative investments in the world and allow you to completely separate as much money as you want from the US banking system. The power of owning the world's trophy assets. There are a handful of one-of-a-kind assets on the planet. We'll show you 20 in all that enable you to own some of the best farmland, office properties, businesses, and mines in the world. Buy these assets when they are cheap. We'll show you exactly how cheap, and you can make enormous gains for many, many years. Details on this start on page 129. And that brings me to step 4. Learn the most important strategies for protecting your family. We don't think you need to go overboard with survival prepping, but if you implement a few strategies and techniques, you and your family will be able to survive no matter what comes our way. That's why in the Survival Blueprint, you'll learn, starting on page 107, the absolute #1 best way to get out of any jam during the next crisis. This is a technique you absolutely must prepare for and know how to use. Porter Stansberry learned this technique from one of the richest men in America and saw it put to use firsthand in South America. This strategy could save you or someone you love in the future. How one small neighborhood survived after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. So many neighborhoods were destroyed and looted, but one used a radical technique to survive pretty much unscathed. What these folks did is extreme and may not be right for you, but depending on where you live, you might consider a version of this strategy for your own neighborhood. The key is to know about it and prepare in advance. Where to go during a crisis in the United States if you don't have a rural retreat and can't leave your state. Here's the safest place in just about every state. A simple way to organize all of your financial documents so you always know where everything is at a moment's notice. This is Porter Stansberry's personal technique. It's simple, it's easy, it's free, and it takes very little time. And there's so much more. Porter Stansberry's America 2020, The Survival Blueprint, is literally packed with dozens of other secrets, tips, ideas, and strategies that will help you survive and prosper in the years to come, including how to invest in the world's best hedge funds without ever paying any fees, how to safely and legally move as much money out of the U.S. and out of the U.S. dollar without having to report a single penny of it to the U.S. government. Yes, this is all completely legal, and it's a strategy used by many savvy Americans today. A unique private gold storage facility in America. You can find one of these operations in virtually every American city and town, and this keeps your assets out of the prying hands of banks and other financial institutions that are beholden to the government. The #1 way to get reliable income in America over the next decade. Forget bonds, CDs, and other risky investments that won't keep up with inflation. Here's the safest way to get all of the income you need for retirement. How to open a foreign bank account. Not everyone needs or wants to do this, but if you do, we'll tell you exactly whom to get in touch with and what to say to do it as simply and as easily as possible. The ultimate wealth defense. Americans today are confused about what kinds of stocks, bonds, and other investments to own. So please, whatever you do, pay close attention to Chapter 10. Here's a plan that is cheap, easy to implement, and is the surest way we know of to have all the money you need for as long as you live, no matter what happens to the dollar or any other currency around the globe. And much, much more. Look, no one can tell you exactly when these life-changing events are coming to America. As Dr. Ron Paul said, we can only tell you that they are certain to occur, and that our country will look very, very different in 5 years than it does today. The facts are simple. We can't afford our debts. We can't stop printing money. And as a result, we're going to see a massive dollar crisis. The only question is, what will it take for you to recognize the crisis for what it is? How high will gold have to go? How many banks will have to be seized by the FDIC? How high do food prices have to soar, or healthcare costs? How many times will our government have to raise the debt ceiling? How much money do they have to continue borrowing just to keep the status quo? In other words, when will you finally realize there's a problem? I hope you'll act now. When the coming currency crisis hits a critical state, it will happen very, very quickly. If our government suddenly finds itself unable to sell bonds at a reasonable price, the US dollar will collapse and become nearly worthless overnight. It's sad, but most people, even smart and successful people, will do nothing. They will continue to assume that tomorrow is pretty much going to be the same as today. Mark my words, as this currency crisis snowballs, these people are going to get wiped out. Please, don't let that happen to you and your family. Many Americans are still in serious denial about a major currency crisis in the United States, but this is natural. In the world of psychology, they call this the normalcy bias. The normalcy bias actually refers to our natural reactions when facing a crisis. It causes smart people to underestimate the possibility of a disaster and its effects. People believe that because something has never happened before, it never will. We're all guilty of it, it's just human nature. What's scary is the normalcy bias often results in making disastrous situations much worse than they would have been otherwise. For example, think about the Jewish populations of World War II. As Barton Biggs reported in his definitive book, Wealth, War, and Wisdom, by the end of 1935, 100,000 Jews had left Germany, but 450,000 still remained. Wealthy Jewish families kept thinking and hoping that the worst was over. As Biggs said, people almost always are too complacent because they cherish the illusion that when things start to go bad, they will have time to extricate themselves. It never works that way. Events move much faster than anyone expects. History usually doesn't evolve in a slow, orderly way. Often it leaps forward in disorderly, chaotic jumps. The point is, take these simple steps now while it's all safe, cheap, easy, and 100% legal. Don't wait. If you wait, it's very likely the situation will change so fast, it will be impossible for you to do anything about. The smartest money people in the world are taking steps to protect themselves. Bill Gross, for example, probably knows as much about currencies and debt as anyone in the world. For years, he ran the world's biggest bond fund. He was quoted by Bloomberg saying, "We've told all of our clients that if you only had one idea, one investment, it would be to buy an investment in a non-dollar currency. That should be on top of the list." And Jim Rogers, one of the world's most successful multimillionaire investors, is saying something similar. "I believe the dollar could lose its status as the world's reserve currency and medium of exchange, something that would lead to a huge decline in the standard of living for U.S. citizens like nothing we've seen in nearly a century." Even Warren Buffett, the world's most renowned investor with a net worth of $72 billion, has reduced his company's bond holdings to their lowest levels in more than a decade, according to Bloomberg News. What Bloomberg didn't mention is that Buffett also moved almost 70% of his remaining government fixed income investments into foreign currencies. Then in recent months, Buffett spent a fortune on a business that will probably see sales quadruple when a big crisis hits. I'm talking about America's #1 battery maker, Duracell. If the smartest money men in America are taking the necessary steps to protect themselves, shouldn't you? Yes, the ideas and solutions we're encouraging you to take might seem somewhat radical to you at first, perhaps even un-American. But as Dr. Ron Paul says, for a patriotic American, there is nothing radical about this approach at all. This is exactly how the founding fathers of our country thought and acted. We're recommending these steps because we love this country. There's still no better place to live, work, and raise a family on earth. We want to see as many people as possible emerge from the mess our government has put us in. And this is the best way possible for you to take personal responsibility to deal with the mess our government has put us in. You can give the 300-page America 2020, the Survival Blueprint, a look at absolutely no risk or obligation. Simply let me know you'd like to take a trial subscription to Porter Stansberry's monthly advisory reports called Stansberry's Investment Advisory, and we'll immediately send you an electronic copy and follow up shortly after with a printed hardback copy delivered to your front door. When you take a completely risk-free look at Porter Stansberry's work, you'll also receive 3 important research reports, which will be critical to protecting and growing your wealth over the next 3 years. These 3 research reports include Research Report Number 1, the tax-free way to make 500% in America today. This research details a remarkable opportunity created entirely by government policies and by the government's massive money printing. It explains an interesting way just about anyone in America can make up to 500% gains tax-free in the years to come without touching stocks, bonds, or precious metals. Many smart investors have moved huge portions of their personal investment portfolios into this unique opportunity. Alternative investment expert Dr. Steve Sugarrood calls it the last great tax shelter in America. And this report shows you a simple formula that allows you to judge the quality of these investments very quickly. Again, this is totally separate from the stock and bond market and allows you to get a large chunk of your money out of the financial system. You'll receive research report number 2, the Gold Investor's Manual. Most people know gold is a good investment to protect against what could happen in a crisis. As Ron Paul would say, gold is not money because government says it is money because the people have chosen to use it in a free country. The problem is most people don't have a clue about the best way to buy or store gold. That's why we created this 152-page manual. It reveals dozens of secrets about the gold industry, specifically the best ways to buy and sell and store your gold. It explains why some gold coins are better than others, how to buy gold with zero dealer markup, how to easily and safely store some of your gold overseas very cheaply, where to hide it, the best ways to buy gold and to have it stored in a secure location in the United States or overseas, and more. Some experts believe gold could reach $5,000 an ounce or $6,000 an ounce in the next few years. Currency expert Jim Rickards says it could reach $7,000 per ounce. And the third research report you'll receive is the 100% secret. If you want the opportunity to make a lot of money during the coming crisis, one sure way to do it is to learn the intricacies of an unusual investment strategy that we've been teaching our readers to use for several years. You don't have to buy a single stock to begin using the strategy, and it has nothing to do with shorting. Learning this technique can be a game changer. In fact, you might never want to buy stocks the ordinary way ever again. One of our readers, named Tommy H., described the impact of learning this secret. He said this has saved his portfolio. In short, we'll show you a way to extract huge sums of cash from the market, potentially without ever owning a single stock. As Pulitzer Prize-winning author James Stewart said, "These payouts are so rich, I consulted a colleague to make sure they were real." Again, all 3 of these research reports and your copy of the 300-page hardback edition of America 2020, The Survival Blueprint, come at no extra charge when you try a 1-year subscription to Porter Stansberry's monthly research advisory letter called Stansberry's Investment Advisory. In his monthly research reports, Porter Stansberry and his team of 5 analysts, including a CPA, lawyer, and former hedge fund manager, regularly update you on America's currency crisis situation, the unintended consequences of the Fed's money printing, and the best ways to grow and protect your money over the next few years. Stansberry's Investment Advisory, which you'll receive on the first Friday of every month, is the perfect way to stay up to date on the currency crisis taking place in America right now. Porter and his team accurately predicted the collapse of GM, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac, Gannett Newspaper, and many others. They also accurately predicted the collapse of General Growth Properties, America's biggest mall owner, and more recently, the huge fall in oil prices long before anyone else we know of. Plus, Porter and his team have found some great ways to make a fortune as the government continues to try to bail out one failing industry after another. In Stansberry's Investment Advisory, Porter and his team will keep you up to date on what they're doing personally to protect themselves. They'll make sure you stay abreast of changes to the laws and government interventions. This currency crisis is a fast-moving situation with lots of moving parts. We think you'll benefit substantially from receiving our work over the next few years. And every day the markets are open, you'll also receive Porter's subscribers-only email called the Stansberry Digest. Here, Porter reports on all the work his firm is doing, the most interesting investment ideas, what they're researching now, and what they expect to happen in the months to come. So how much does this work cost, and how can you get started? Well, a 1-year subscription, including everything mentioned here, normally costs $149 per year. That's what many others have paid. But right now, we're going to knock $50 off the sticker price so you can try Porter Stansberry's research right away. You'll pay just $99 for an entire year. That's more than a 30% discount. Why so cheap? Well, we realize you've got to try Porter's work first to see if it's right for you. And that's why through this presentation, we're making it so cheap and essentially risk-free to try. You'll have the next 4 months to take a look at the research reports I've just described, plus the next 4 issues of Porter's advisory newsletter, and the next 4 months of his daily digest reports. If you decide for any reason within the first 4 months that his work is not right for you, just let us know and you can receive a full refund. And keep everything you've received so far, including your 300-page hardback copy of America 2020, The Survival Blueprint. In other words, by taking advantage of this offer, you are agreeing only to try Porter's work to see if you like it. Remember, by paying just $99 today, you'll receive the 300-page hardback copy of America 2020, The Survival Blueprint. You'll receive an electronic copy instantly and then a hard copy in the mail soon after. You'll also receive the research report, The Tax-Free Way to Make 500% in America Today, the research report, The Gold Investor's Manual, and the 100% Secret Research Report. You'll also receive a 1-year, 12 monthly issues delivered on the first Friday of each month subscription to Porter Stansberry's monthly analysis called Stansberry's Investment Advisory. Plus, Porter's daily, paid subscribers-only email update called The Digest. Please take the simple steps necessary to protect yourself and your family. At the very least, start a subscription to Porter's work, which gives you immediate access to his survival blueprint and all of the valuable reports you need to see. Keep your hardback copy of the survival blueprint nearby and print them out or save the other research reports so you have them forever. Then take 4 months to check out Porter's research. If you decide it doesn't make sense for you for any reason, just call our customer service group located in our Baltimore office. We've got a toll-free telephone line, and you can request a full refund for the money you paid in a matter of minutes. And even if you decide after 4 months that Porter's work is not right for you, no problem. You can still get a prorated refund for any time remaining on your subscription. And of course, you get to keep your copy of the 300-page hardback book, Our Compliments. To get started, simply click on the Order Now link below, which will take you to a secure order form. Your order will be processed immediately, and you'll have access to all of Porter Stansberry's work in a matter of minutes. Today, Porter still reads every note and email subscribers send in. The feedback Stansberry Research has received over the years is simply incredible. For example,
my IRA has gone from a low of $315,000 to the present high of $952,000. I can only thank you for changing my life so much.
We even got an interesting note from a reader with the initials UR who says he made a small killing, enough to buy a nice-sized boat and a house in Mexico. Here's the photo he sent, and here's what he said.
We took delivery of her 3 weeks ago and are cruising the Bahamas. In October, we'll take her through the Panama Canal, over to the Pacific side, since I just bought a home in Mexico.
As Porter says, nothing makes us feel better than receiving notes like these. And today, Stansberry Research has literally tens of thousands of notes like these from our readers over the years, right here in our Baltimore headquarters. We've grown to be one of the largest research organizations of our kind in the world, and we have an A+ rating with the leading online reputation management website. You can't reach an A+ status without lots and lots of happy customers. Plus, we also have earned something else that no rating agency can ever bestow. To date, Stansberry Research has had more than 35,000 subscribers from around the globe tell us they like our work so much they want to receive it for life, the rest of their lives. We know of no other business in the financial industry that has anywhere near this number of happy lifetime subscribers. To us, this is the absolute strongest endorsement we could ever receive because it comes directly from the people who know us best, our customers. But here's the thing. Right now, we're extremely worried that a lot of our subscribers and many, many hardworking Americans are going to get caught totally by surprise when this crisis escalates. Get the facts. Learn how to protect yourself and your family. Don't let what's about to happen in America over the next few years catch you by surprise. We're not asking you to make any big commitment whatsoever. All we want you to do is take a few minutes to try our no-risk trial subscription. Just try our research at no risk or obligation to see if you like it. Take an immediate look at our 300-page America 2020 blueprint and the research reports described here, plus Stansberry's Investment Advisory, which will arrive on the first Friday of every month. All this information is yours to keep, whether you choose to continue reading Porter's work or not. You're not risking even a penny to check everything out. Get started now by clicking the Order Now link below. This will take you to a secure order form where you'll have the chance to review everything once more before submitting your order.